my main thing, if we're talking the business aspect, is my main thing is I got a really good piece of advice early on from another creator, Jeff Talanian. He says when you make something, just make sure it's genuine. That the genuineness will come through. People can smell somebody being fake from a mile away. If they know that you're you're specifically made something to try to sell them this thing, it's, in a creative field, it doesn't always come across the way that you would hoped.
Hi, welcome to the Dieku Podcast. I'm Gary Snow, and today I welcome Levi Combs, the creative mind behind Planet X, which has produced such titles as Escape from Skulcano Island, Robots and Rayguns, and Occurrence at Howling Crater, and Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride, all awesome names. Most recently, Levi is kickstarting Chainsaw Wizards, Hecatomb Creeps, and Other Ungodly Bastards. So another awesome name. So Levi, welcome.
Hey man, how are you?
I'm doing good. Right off the bat, I have to say your name selection and your creativity when it comes to the names, they just evoke such a nice atmosphere for the types of games that you create.
Yeah, I just want to make stuff that I would want to buy, that I would think is cool and would want to play. So I think as long as you're genuine about that, it comes across.
Yeah, well, it's super cool, and we're going to get into all your kind of previous history of game design and all that. But as always, we got to kind of start off. How did you get involved in this crazy little hobby?
Oh wow! So I was like everybody. I was a player. I picked the game up I picked up D&D in my teens, and had a kind of an unconventional entry into the hobby because I came from such a small town in the South. So it was right smack dab in the middle of the Satanic Panic. My parents were not very religious. So I didn't see much of that. They were just well, as long as you're not out breaking windows or, stealing stuff from the pharmacy or something, if you're just at home on a Friday night playing a game, that's pretty cool with us. So, so I had a really, kind of a weird entry into the hobby, and then just loved and supported Dungeons and Dragons for most of my life. Loved other RPGs, got into Champions and Cyberpunk and really anything we could get our hands on back in the day before the kind of the dawn of Google Plus and where the indie scene started to come on. And anything we get our hands on, we would try to play.
In a small town of 5,000 people, how many actually other players were there? Did you have a close-knit group or were you the only group?
We were the only group in town. So, if you wanted to play D&D, you played with us. There were no other kids playing D&D, or RPGs of any kind. It was, listen, it was a typical small town. Sports were big, hunting was big, fishing was big, but playing D&D and watching metal videos on MTV was not, that was not everybody's idea of a good time. We were the kind of kids who were members of the science fiction book club, or, we were listening to bands that were, everybody else was listening to Garth Brooks. We were listening to Slayer, so it was, without being the bad kids, quote unquote. We were just nerds and geeks, just we loved our hobby, and we loved movies and comics, and we were just those kids.
So when you watch Stranger Things, did that resonate for you? That
1,000%, yeah. That was very similar to kind of my experience growing up.
Yeah, and same
without all the monsters and psychic trauma and. So
yeah, but I grew up in a small town like that as well. There might be two playing groups, but the other ones were a year older than us, so we didn't kind of mix. But
well, we didn't even have books. That was the thing. I didn't. There was no place to buy books. First of all, you had to drive about 2 hours away to go to a Barnes and Noble, or back then it was Walden Books was the big thing. So if you wanted to get one of them, there's no internet, so you couldn't just order one. So you had to either get it secondhand or you had to get it from like the back of a magazine, which is I got my monster manual, I want to say in 83 or 84 from a yard sale. And I bought it just because it looked cool. It had all these cool pictures in it, and I'm like 9 or 10. And then like 3 months after that, I'm looking in the back of like an issue of Fangoria or Starlog. It was one of those Cinefantastique or one of those magazines you would see at like the grocery store. Mom, will you please buy this for me? And in the back of that, there was an ad for the red box. And so I sent off for the red box. I get it. There's no dice in the red box. So I'm trying to wonder how to put the red box together with the monster manual, 2 different games. But to me, they're both Dungeons and Dragons. And I have no dice. And I didn't understand at the time like that there were supposed to be dice. So I'm like D20s, D4s, D8. I don't know what they're talking about. So we were just flipping coins, actually, or just kind of making it up as we went. And that went on for about a year. And then these kids moved to town, and their dad had been in the Air Force, and he had played Dungeons and Dragons. And I just offhand mentioned one day, like, hey, we should play Dungeons and Dragons. And his ears kind of perked up. And he's like, oh, you know how to play Dungeons and Dragons? You should come over and we'll all play. And when I got there, they had dice and they had all the books. They had I'd never seen a player's handbook or a Dungeon Master's Guide or anything before. They had all this stuff. And I was like, this is not what I thought it was. And from then it was just off to the races. So
it's always amazing when I hear some of the origin stories and how like a chance encounter, like what if you weren't there they weren't there to overhear the conversation or whatnot, and your whole life trajectory could sometimes change.
No, absolutely. I mean, like, again, I've been a supporter of RPGs literally my whole life. There's times when I've not been in it as much, but I've always had at least one little toe into RPGs. Even if I wasn't actively buying them all the time, I was still reading them or going back and reading my old books or writing them just for myself. So.
And yeah. When I look at your design, and we'll get to that shortly, when I look at all your designs, and it goes outside the realm of traditional fantasy D&D, and I can't help but think of, like you're talking about, you play Cyberpunk and other games, and I myself, I mean, I love D&D. I used to play it all the time, but I really liked those weird little genre games that were just kind of like oddball. They didn't fit anywhere. Those were the games that I preferred to referee if I was just refereeing, because it was just kind of like different. But what kind of inspiration, like as you like talk about some of the former games or like media that you consumed, how did that play into kind of some of your design aesthetics that you're using now, like movies, TV?
Oh yeah, no. So if we're talking RPGs, the one that influenced me the most that was not D&D was Arduin, because this family, the father, he had not only did he have all the D&D books, but he had like all the Dragon Tree Press stuff. And he had all those. Well, he had the 3 little Arduin books. Was it Arduin Grimoire, Skull Tower, and Runes of Doom. He had all 3 of those, and nobody else was drawn to them, but I was like drawn to them because I was reading them, and there were all these ideas and cool stuff inside. So that was like a huge boost for me because it was very non-traditional. It's that's the first genre bashing game where there's you've got ninjas and pirates and all kinds of cowboys and interdimensional beings and horror, and you got all this stuff in there. So that was really influential on me. But then just as like somebody who consumes a lot of pop culture, like I loved comic books, huge comic book fan, especially when I was a teenager, like a younger kid and a teenager. I mean, I grew up like right at the 85. I was 11 years old. That's when you get the Dark Knight Returns and V for Vendetta, and you get Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the whole indie boom of like Scout and Grimjack and all these different kind of grim and gritty properties take over. Frank Miller had been writing Daredevil, so you just get all these really cool like seminal comic book stories. So that was a huge influence. And then the 80s, man, it's, you had Star Wars, you had Indiana Jones, you got some great James Bond films. You've got some of the greatest horror films ever made were made in the 80s, like you get Halloween and you get The Thing, all these great films. So I was consuming all of that like late night on HBO or Showtime or whatever, tuning in at like USA Network, up all night, I was watching Grandpa Munster being a horror host, Elvira, all that stuff kind of jumbles together and mixes and creates this, the influences on me, so, without that 80s pop culture, and then even into the 90s, a little bit, like that really is like the cornerstone of the stuff that influences all the stuff that I do.
And then we talked about it before we started, but your Instagram account, like, first of all, awesome content on it, and like not just your Instagram account, but all your socials. But in particular, like when I saw your Instagram account, and I was like, wow, you have over like 100,000 followers, and the content is like kind of a mashup of all those media and genres that you love.
Yeah.
And isn't very game specific, but you have like a huge audience. Huge. Did you ever anticipate it was going to be like that?
No, and I didn't. It's not like I specifically built it to be a thing. We were talking about it earlier, but I had been posting the same stuff like on, different, MySpace. Back when MySpace was a thing, or like in Facebook groups and whatnot. And had just, it was just all stuff that I was interested in. And then when Instagram kind of started picking up in popularity, it's like, well, I already have an Instagram page for like me and my family and stuff, Well, let me try one that's just like a pop culture, and I'll just put a bunch of stuff up there that I like. And some days there are no posts, and then other days there are like 8. Just like it's a stream of consciousness thing. And I think if I had to like quantify it, I think people like it because it's genuine. Like, it's not me trying to post something I think you'll like. It's just stuff that I like. And then like once every 50 posts, I'll put up, hey, I've got a Kickstarter. It's not like I'm trying to jam it down your throat. The people, again, get enough of that during the campaign, when there's emails and Facebook ads, and all that. There's enough of that. So you can only see like that stuff so many times before, you just become numb to it. So, if there's stuff like, well, one day I'll be talking about the creature from the Black Lagoon, or then I'll post a picture of Adrian Barbeau from The Fog. And then the next thing will be like some, obscure horror host from, Boise, Idaho. And then the next thing might be like a dissertation on, some run on a comic book from 1979. Like, it's just stuff that's in my head. It's just a stream of consciousness.
Do you find it when you do post, hey, by the way, I have a little game here, and there's a Kickstarter for it, and do you have people kind of going, well, I didn't even know this channel was about that, and like how much of it, from a business perspective, I guess, like a lot of people are obviously in our space are trying to figure out how to get eyeballs on their games and that kind of stuff. And do you find a lot of conversion from that, or?
No, not really. First, I'm terrible at that stuff. When it really comes down to it, I really am. My main thing, if we're talking the business aspect, is my main thing is I got a really good piece of advice early on from another creator, Jeff Talanian. He says when you make something, just make sure it's genuine. That the genuineness will come through. People can smell somebody being fake from a mile away. If they know that you're trying to, that you're specifically made something to try to sell them this thing, it's in a creative field, it doesn't always come across the way that you would hoped. So I just said, well, let me this Instagram feed and all my social media is really just me talking about stuff I like. And if you're into it, cool. And if you're not, also cool. But when it comes to, the Kickstarters and, selling books and stuff, like if you like my, social media, odds are you're probably going to like my stuff. So, again, not forcing it down your throat, but, here's an option to give it a try. And if that works, then great. If it's your thing, cool. Welcome to the show.
And then the other thing that I did mention to you before we started, and I appreciate just as like, an advocate for indie games, is that you really do promote other people, probably more than yourself for sure. And I think that really comes across as authentic and genuine, that you go like, this is a cool product. And, in business, and like you said, being authentic, that people really do appreciate somebody coming with like a voice to go, this is a cool game, try it out, check it out. And it's validating the fact that there's other creatives in the space that could probably
Oh
use some
yeah.
help and get eyeballs on it.
Yeah. I mean, well, when I was trying to get my foot in the door, this is like 5-6 years ago, I was trying to get just anybody really to just notice my, that I had a game, or not even a game. I just had a module. I was just, somebody please, pay attention to this. I had got some help early on from some very nice people. One of them is like a longtime mentor of mine, Casey Christopherson. He's got like almost probably 100 RPG credits at this point. But he's done a ton of work for Troll Lords and Frog God Games, Necromancer Games. He's done a bunch of stuff. Extremely talented and gifted guy. But he was the guy who said, "Hey, listen, I tried to push your idea, and it's just, you're lost in a sea of other people, But hey, have you tried Kickstarter?" And I said, "What's Kickstarter?" I had no idea. So he introduces me to that. He walks me through it. He says, "Listen, man," he says, "do your thing. Again, it's genuine. I'll help you every step of the way. If you have questions about it, it doesn't matter if you call me at 2:00 in the morning or you text me in the middle of the night, I'll answer them. I want you to get your stuff out in the world. I want you to understand that you have an audience for this." And because, of his encouragement and his help, he helped me find artists. He walked me through the graphic design portion, how to host thing, the whole, everything really. Make sure your budget is like this, yada, yada, yada. And if he didn't know the answer, he sent me to somebody else. That's how I ended up meeting Matt Finch and Jeff Talanian, who I mentioned earlier. He vouched for me. Like, he was the guy who said, "Hey, this dude's okay. Can you answer a question or two?" And those other guys were very, very, very nice and took time out of their busy schedules for this person they did not know, and then walked me through the process. So once I had a handle on it, I thought, well, you got to, not so much give back, but you have to do this for other people, So instead of being like a critic, somebody who like, well, I've got 2 products here, one I like, one I don't like. Let me trash this one I don't like, and let me talk up this one I do like. I'm not about that. Like, there's plenty of people who do that, and that's not for me. I just won't talk about this one I don't like, and that's fine. There's somebody out there does like it. But the one that I do like, let me be, again, genuine about it and put it out there and say, hey, this is a good product. Like, this is really, really cool. You can say, and even if it's like something you're lukewarm on, you can still talk about it without being a dick. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's important. And I really wish other RPG creators would do it. There's lots who do. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of people who do, but I see a lot of people get a lot of help and then not helping maybe some other folks that help them. So it would be nice to see that more, but
yeah. And sometimes I do kind of wonder if I think a lot of like emerging designers, like new designers, they kind of feel that there's only so much success to go around, and if I'm not part of that little group of success, then I'll never be. So I don't want to encourage other people to come into the success group, and that's it's
not even people who are just getting into the hobby. It's a lot of people who have been here a long time. There are companies who are great about supporting smaller, more independent creators. Necromancer Games is fabulous at it. They are constantly shouting out people who are smaller than them. Like this, as far as like, the size of the company, if it's a 1 or 2 person outfit, they're always helping. They're always saying, hey, this person has a cool product, or our friends over here did this, and yada, yada, yada. They're great about that. And there's lots of folks who are like that. 321 Action, just tons of folks are really good about it. But there are some who have benefited from a great amount of success, based on other people shouting them out, or maybe not based, but certainly helped by, that you never see talking about anything but themselves. And it's sad. It'd be cool if it was a little different. I'm a part of this thing called the Independent Publishers Union. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, the IPU.
Yep.
But it's me and 5 or 6 other small publishers, and that's one of our strengths is we always help each other, whether it's booth costs, at a convention, or it's, hey, I stepped away from the table, but hey, this guy's here. He's if somebody comes by interested in your book, he's going to tell you about it, or if it's online or sharing Kickstarters or, because if you believe in your stuff and you think what you have is genuine and that people will enjoy it, then really all they need to do is hear about it. So it's a great help being involved in something like that.
Cool. Well, and now that we've been talking about other people, let's talk about you some more and some of your games. I'm going to add, so the first time that I probably stumbled across you, it was with the Phylactery, and I don't know which edition off the top of my head, but I remember kind of seeing that. And like, I'm sorry if they're probably out of sequence here as far as your
it's first and second issue right there.
Oh, okay. but as far as like all your game designs and your modules and adventures versus the Phylactery, and first of all, I had to I've never heard the term Phylactery before, so I had to Google it. And is it? You tell me what it is, because what I came across was the little box that Jewish people wear, but I could be wrong on that.
Right. So it has nothing to do with that. This is the Phylactery is in the term of the way it's used in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which is a Phylactery is where a lich keeps its soul, its soul in this specially prepared object. And I'm not prepared to go into what the detail. I don't know how that connects back to. There are people way smarter than me who have gone way deep into that. But I don't know. I can't tell you as far as what connects to what.
Yeah.
But I have asked my friends who are Jewish whether or not this was offensive before I ever did it, and they were like, no, absolutely not. No, this is not something. There's literally no connection between what is real and what you're trying to do here. So, and it has a long established history in Dungeons and Dragons, going back to at least the first edition of the game where they talked about it. So, yeah, it's just a lich's soul receptacle. So,
okay.
I thought it was a cool name.
and Planet X. How did that come about? It's perfect for the style of game you're making, so it's obviously a good choice. But how did you kind of come across that as far as this is my outward identity, your brand?
Oh, man, I hate that word, brand. I know. I get it though. I'm so not that guy who was I've got a brand. I've got to stick to my brand. That's not for me. However, Planet X comes from two things. In classic atomic retro sci-fi style, the tag "It came from beyond Planet X" sounds like something that you would see thrown up on a TV screen one Saturday morning after the Westerns played. It's definitely that sort of vibe. But I've had countless people reach out to me via email, and they're like, yeah, the 10th planet and Nibiru and all this, all this stuff about, not so much conspiracy theory, but all this stuff about ancient aliens and stuff. And that's for sure what it is. And I'm like, well, I hadn't really thought about that, but I guess Planet X, Planet 10, 10th planet, I get, okay, and I don't hate it, but it's kind of cool, but that's honestly not where it came from. So,
and if you look at the covers, obviously, the vibes that they evoke is definitely that era of Fangoria, Starlog, He-Man, Saturday morning cartoons.
That one you have up right now, number 3, that's obviously a takeoff of the old X-Men cover.
Yeah.
I think X-Men 143 or 140, one of those X-Men covers, The Days of Future Past, and it's our friends Ayla and Gabe on the front there. And then everybody in the back there is just people that have helped me out or have been cool to me, during the early days of Planet X. Ed Bickford did that, and he did a smashing job on that. Just really, really good.
Yeah, super cool. And
I
then,
don't. Real quick, can you go back?
yeah,
Do you see the Planet X logo?
yeah.
Okay, so that is a direct like shout out to the Shaw Brothers, who used to do all the old kung fu flicks. If you go and look at the Shaw Brothers logo, it's literally the same thing but SB.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you're a fan of those old like kung fu flicks from Sunday afternoons, anything from like Master of the Flying Guillotine or Enter the Dragon or Return to the 36th Chamber, any of those kind of like old House of Traps, any of those kind of old kung fu flicks, that was all Shaw Brothers stuff, or most of it was. And they were kind of the kings of kung fu films.
Yeah.
So that was my shout out to them. Like, all right, just so you get my vibe.
Yeah, cool. And then I love this cover for Escape from Skulcano Island. It's just awesome. And now I have to ask about your artist selections, like consistency versus like trying different art and like timing and scheduling. How do you kind of decide that from a art design perspective?
I have a couple guys that I've worked with one of them from the very beginning, but most of the guys that I work with now are guys that I've worked with since around the beginning. The first say four things that I did. I'm still hanging with the same guys. Still like these covers. A lot of them are done by an artist named Adrian Landeros. He started with me on Jungle Tomb and the Mummy Bride, and he's literally the artist on my latest project. So he and I, at this point, have probably done a couple hundred pieces of art together. Or he has done them. He's the artist. But I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's fantastic. I want to say when we started, he was 17, and I want to say he's 23 now. So he's really, that's another one. Rayguns and Robots. That's an artist named Ed Bickford. He's also done a ton of covers and a ton of interior work. And he and I are friends. We get along really good. He comes from the comic book world. And he has a penchant for like a real cool aesthetic for drawing robots, monsters, and like mechanical things. So he was obviously the perfect guy to draw that.
And maybe this would be a good time to kind of jump in and go, like, when you're designing a product, and I know you don't want to talk probably about brands and products and that kind of stuff, but when you're designing something like that, and with systems and is it DCC, is it OSE, is it, how do you where are you gravitating to now versus like, has there been an evolution of like your design choices as far as what you're presenting out, and has it benefited or been negatives and learned over time?
I wouldn't say there are any negatives. Everything that I put out is something that I've played. It's something that I would want to play. So 5th edition, Dungeons and Dragons, I put out a bunch of stuff for that. I enjoy it. It's not my system of choice. But again, I've supported Dungeons and Dragons for, since I was a teenager. And I do love the game. I'll always have a deep-seated love for the game. But as I get older, I want simpler systems, or I want systems that are just have a little something different to offer. So I really like DCC, and I really like OSE. Both of those systems I'm big fans of, and even like older versions of Dungeons and Dragons. Like I like BX, I like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. They're, as far as those fantasy systems go, like that's kind of what I'm trending towards, is DCC, OSE, things like that.
It seems like your games are very like could be awesome for DCC, especially like the kind of vibes that you present.
Well, DCC is more than a vibe. You need to know the rules, and you have to respect that dice chain. You've got to. It's got to be more than just a. Knocking the serial numbers off the old module, and like with this one you have on the screen, Jungle Tomb and the Mummy Bride. Like Jeff Seifert and I, we took a real care in converting that, because we wanted it to feel not just like something that had just had the stats swapped out, but we wanted to actually feel like DCC. So we took some care of that. We made some missteps. There's some things looking back that we could have done a little bit better, but that's really just me like kind of picking at myself. I still think it's a really, really cool adventure. And the next one that's coming, it's being printed now, in Occurrence at Howling Crater. That's even further zeroed in on that DCC MCC aesthetic. That's the old one. That's the one for 5th edition, but there's a new one coming. It kickstarted like 4 or 5 months ago. So, yeah.
Cool. And then just just the names and the vibes that you've been producing over time. Big Eye Chungus and Magic and shit. It's just fun. So I can see like every time you see like something come out from you just kind of go, oh, that sounds like fun. It's totally my vibe.
Well, Magic and shit, that came out of a text message with my best friend. He's also did the cover there. He and I were talking one day and about playing D&D, back when we were teenagers, and how it really didn't matter where we were, or how we sometimes spent whole weekends playing D&D. And he mentioned something about how we were getting up to all that magic and shit, and I was like, oh, that's funny. We should make that a zine. Ha ha ha. And then I forgot about it. And then like a week later, he just sends me that exact cover.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I'm going to start writing this right now. And I did. And like 3 weeks later, I had it done. And I was like, well, let me pay you for the cover. Let's do some interior art. Let's get some of our friends to do some art. And then boom, it was done. Like, it literally just sprang out of like this crazy text message conversation we were having. Yeah.
It's funny how things happen. Hey. And then, before we jump into this particular Kickstarter, so how many Kickstarters have you done now, just approximately? And like over time, do you see that as like your platform of choice? Like everything kind of has lined up that people are expecting games from you, and like you have a big following on there?
I wouldn't say a big following, not by any stretch. But the people who have backed my projects, they do seem to be pretty loyal, and they're very generous by returning time and again. And man, I'm thankful for that, because that lets me, because they return, that lets me write new books. Gives me an audience to write stuff for. Yeah, it's just, I don't know if it's my preferred platform or choice. I would rather just get to a place at some point where I can write it and just put it out and people will get it. That would be preferable, but I don't think I'm there yet. Like, I still think I'm at the independent publisher level where I need to fund it first, because I want to make sure everybody gets paid first. That's the number one thing. And then make sure that the books get made and that they're quality, and that's all that stuff's important, especially if you want to have any kind of longevity, I think. So yeah, that's the goal, that's the angle. But as far as like, I mean, I wish I could just put books out and people would get them, but
yeah.
Kickstarter will work until that happens. And if it never happens, well, we'll just stay on Kickstarter and that'll be that. So.
And probably like 99% of the other designers out there, you wish it could be your full-time job, as far as like being able to make games for a living. Are you able to do that? Or somewhat?
Well, yes and no. So my family and I, we moved from California. My wife's in the military, so we move around a lot. Or she was in the military. She literally just retired like days ago. But we moved around a lot. So I was always happy because she was the one who had the military job when we got married. I would have to restart every 3 or 4 years. Like I would go someplace, get in, and then rise to whatever management position. And then, 3 or 4 years later, we move, had to start all over again. So I had to find a way to a side hustle. I was the kind of guy who always had side hustle. I was always doing something. So this fit really well. It wasn't planned, but it fit really well in with the side hustle. So the last few years, we moved from California during COVID to Virginia, and then very quickly out of Virginia to Maryland, where my wife's family is from. And the last 2 years, this has been my sole focus. Like, I've just been, as far as work goes, I've just been doing this. and it's worked out. But now we've bought a house, so I've had to go. I'm back to work for the government, doing working my way back up. But now we don't have to move, so hopefully I can. Things will be more stable, you know.
Cool. And
So
like
two jobs.
when you go from I guess different base to base around the world or around North America or USA, do you find a group that you play with locally, or do you still maintain friends that you play online with?
Oh, I'll try both. It just depends. Like, not every environment is really, especially if you're there for a short term, is not exactly welcoming. But I've had some great game groups in Alaska and California. Just didn't have time to get one going in Virginia. Although there are some fantastic players that I now wish I had game with, that I've met, that I wish I'd game with in Virginia. But yeah, we've started one here, so we're going to see where that goes. They're kind of my playtester group now. But then I play online too. I'm in some a couple really fantastic online groups. One with we're playing the Caverns of Thracia now for the DCC conversion, and that's going fantastic. That's a really, really good group. But yeah, just a little bit of both, you know. And then cons, I get a lot of gaming done at cons. Like, I'm not like a social hobnobber, you know. Like, if I go to a con, like, I want to have conversations. And if it's after hours at the bar, like, I want to get into things. Like, I want to have, it doesn't have to be about gaming. Like, let's just talk about fishing, or, you know, or about movies or whatever. But I want to have conversations. And if I'm not doing that, I want to be gaming, man. I want to play some games I haven't played before, and play with people that I've only met online, or maybe games I wouldn't get a chance to play anywhere else, and of course run my own. So when you're at a convention like that, 4 days, 5 days, like, it's really busy. Like, it's from early in the morning until late at night. We get up and do it the next day again. So
cool. Well, let's jump into Chainsaw Wizards, and I say Hecatomb, but Hecatomb Creeps and Other Ungodly Bastards.
Yeah, Hecatomb Creeps. A hecatomb is like a burial mound. It's I picked up that term years and years ago. I went through a brief stint where I played Magic the Gathering. I think we all did. It's a cool game. And there was one of my favorite cards was this card called Hecatomb, where it would just like churn out like undead tokens, you know. And when it came time, I was naming this project. I was like, oh, I'm gonna call this thing, like, it's so crazy. I don't want to call it like the Tome of Foes. That's like that even saying it puts me to sleep, you know. So I came up with this title, and I was like, ooh, Hecatomb Creeps. That sounds pretty awesome. So I threw that in there as well.
So what's the elevator pitch for this game? Just a quick 1 minute. Like, what are people expecting?
No, it's this. Listen, this is there are a lot of monster books out there, you know, that give you brand new monsters, and there are a lot of really good ones. But there's not a lot of resources out there for villains who will plague your characters, or will be the notable NPCs. Sure, you have them scattered around campaign settings and whatnot, and there's a couple older books that are really, really good for this sort of thing. But I wanted to make a book that was full of strange and unusual villains, first of all. Stuff that that wasn't just going to be an evil wizard or like an anti-paladin. I wanted there to be a catch, something interesting. So there's a lot. That's the focus: is weird fantasy, strange and unusual villains. But then in that there's lore, and there's new items and new magic. There's all kinds of new abilities, and there's always plot hooks, that are written into each one of these guys that will allow you to take it and put it right into your game. You can plug and play it right into whatever kind of fantasy that you're playing. And more importantly, there's a range and power of those foes. Like, there's low level ones, and then they go all the way up into to very high level, world threatening problems. So you've got a real array of different kinds of villains.
And when you came up with the concepts and then the art, like, what kind of back and forth did you go? Did you go, this is the villain I want, here's the kind of the ideas behind it? And then did the art also help influence some of the ideas?
No, it was more, again, this is Adrian Landeros, who I've worked with, I think like on 18 projects at this point, maybe 17, but a lot of stuff that we've worked together on. And I trust him. Like, he's one of those really cool, really rare artists, honestly, that you can give a description to and say, and you've got it in your mind's eye of how it's going to look, right? Like, oh, this is how I want it. And you give it to him, and he comes back a week later, and it looks way better than you ever thought it would look. Like, the way that you envisioned in your head, he came up with something that was way, way better. So usually I just send him, like, here's a paragraph of a description, and maybe just like a couple notes, you know. And then sometimes it's not even that. But I know in my head, like, I know that he's going to kill it. You know, I know that it's going to be, whatever he does is going to be awesome. He gets the vibe at this point. So, and like for this project, he did all the art. He did all the art is rendered by him. All the villains are illustrated by him. The cover is by him. This is like a showcase for his art. Like, it's real tight stuff.
Well, super cool. And I will mention to everybody that's watching or listening, all the links for the Kickstarter will be in the video descriptions or the podcast description. So make sure you check it out. Looks like a fun project. And I know we're filming this on May 24th. It might not come out exactly on May 24th, but pretty quickly after. But when does it end?
It ends on June 6th, if I remember correctly. It's a 3-week span. We're about a week and change into it. And I want to say there's like 13 days left or 12, something like that. But it's funded, and I didn't put any stretch goals in here because I think stretch goals can sometimes they can be a little misleading, and sometimes they can get a little out of control. But what I am doing is that the higher it funds, the bigger I'm making the book. So, like, already I've reached out to a couple friends of mine who had some really good ideas. Zach from World of Game Design, Rocky from Silver Boulay, and I have a couple other guys that I'm courting to bring in to do some really cool villains. But you know, this started out as like a 60-page book, and I think it's already up to like 80 pages now. So, like, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And the more it funds, the more that I'll put into it. The more villains you'll get, the more cool stuff. So, you know, I mean, I've had books that weren't even supposed to be hardback that I've said, well, it funded so well, let's make it a hardback, you know, or hey, let's add another $3,000 worth of art into this because it funded really, 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 you know, really well. So you're not getting the bare minimum. None of my books you ever get the bare minimum. Like, I jam pack these things, or try to, just full. So if you wanted to pitch, man, that's reason enough. You know, you're going to pay the base price. You're going to get all this extra stuff. So there you
heard it. Just fund it and see what happens. Let's see how big we can get it. And
yeah.
Do you have a process as far as, like, over time, like, did you ever go through Drive-Thru RPG and now you're like, no, I've got my printers doing offset, and like, that's who I use all the time, and this is who I use for shipping and that kind of thing. Like, you know, a lot of the audience here are, you know, game designers that are like, you know, struggling to find that balance of what works for them.
And I would be happy to tell you. Matter of fact, if you're listening to this, you can cold call me or email me, and I will give you all the people that I use. Like, if you're curious about like a place that you need somewhere in the US that if you need a printer, and it doesn't matter if it's for a zine or a hardback or a soft cover, I've got some sources, and these are the ones I can vouch for that I know do a good job. So if you're listening to this and you need that push, man, just hit me up on social media. I will definitely get back to you and help you out. But as far as your actual question, no, I did not use Drive-Thru RPG for a long time. I didn't care for their interface. That has changed. They've made some improvements in the interface, especially as far as, like, you know, cell phones go. The mobile experience is much better now. So I may return at some point to them. But at the moment, I have an exclusive deal with Exalted Funeral. They are awesome partners. Like, you could not ask for better partners than Exalted Funeral. They're very fair. They're very creator centric, and they do a magnificent job. So if you want to get my books, you get them through there. which is why, again, the big reason I'm not on Drive-Thru RPG. But as far as printers go, I have worked mostly with the same folks. And I don't want to mention their name, but there have been a few printers along the way that I've had to let go. I can't trust them to do what they say they're going to do. I've had to let a few go, but I've landed on some that are really great, and I would be happy to share those resources with anybody.
And do you ship it all or print it and then get it shipped to Exalted Funeral, or do you have like a garage full of boxes and you kind of...
I used to have a garage full of boxes. I used to have a whole room full of boxes. But I'm very fortunate enough that I live fairly close to the Exalted Funeral East Coast warehouse, which is near Baltimore. And I live 80 miles from Baltimore. So I'm able to also store my stuff there. So Exalted Funeral can sell books, and I can, have my stuff shipped. I just have my stuff shipped to the warehouse. They handle it all. So Exalted Funeral I don't have to send books to Exalted Funeral. They're already at the same place that they would be shipping from anyway. So it's a good meeting of options. So, I don't ship out personally anymore. Sometimes I'll have like a random copy that I'll send to somebody or whatever, but like most of it gets done through a place called Flying Cloud right outside of Baltimore.
Okay. And then I guess, obviously you're in the middle of a Kickstarter and it's probably hard to look ahead because, you're right in the thick of it. But where do you see yourself? Like, what's your big plans here in the next few years? What would you like to do? Just do more of the same? Or do you have like a big project that you're kind of kicking around?
That's a great question. Weirdly, nobody has ever asked me that, but I do have an answer. I'm a planner. I tend to plan things out because it just goes better that way. Previous life I was a logistics manager, so it helps. So yeah, I have a product line pretty much out for the next 2 years. So I know what I'm putting out. I have a game system that I would like to see get out there, but it's still way early. It might not come out for several years. It needs a lot of play testing. It just, I got to keep tweaking it, but it's a great idea and it's got a really cool aesthetic and it's something that I would want to play. So, but again, I don't want to release some half-baked crap. So, a lot of play testing, a lot of cons, a lot of this over Zoom, trying to work the kinks and bugs out. But coming up, after this, I'm doing a project with a friend. It's kind of a community project, a bunch of people, but there's a French artist named Laz the Eye. Do you know Laz? Laz the Eye. He's a big in the DCC community. Great dude. But we're putting out a book called The Closet of the Eye Wizard, and it's weirdly enough, I say book, it's a zine, but it's about all these. Basically magical hats and magical headwear. And we got a bunch of people from the DCC community and from the RPG community to each write a single hat. And then on top of that, it was different artists for each hat. So it's less like a zine, like a resource that you would use for your, that you bring to the table and read, and more like an art book, because every page is different. And every aesthetic, every time you open up the double spread, it's something different. The one from Brian Shutter of Neon Lords looks like a Neon Lords product, but then you turn the page and there's, something for me and it looks like a Planet X product, or you turn the page on that and there's Jim Wampler's, something from Mutant Crawl Classic, you know what I'm saying? So yeah. It all looks, every page is different. And the whole thing is more like an individual expression of that artist, and that writer. It's very, very cool. It's a really, really cool book. And we're going to, we're putting a low price tag on it, make it very accessible for people to get. And we just want to get it out there to the world. We're not really making any money off of it. It's more of like, we're going to print as many copies as we can, and just get it out there. So I think it's it's less like a source book or something that you would bring to the table, and just more like something that's really fun and is just cool. So I'm really looking forward to that. After that, there's some modules, some more zines. I've got more of the same that you're seeing here. So
cool. Well, when you get some other items lined up, feel free to come back and share them with us. And I'm sure the audience is going to be interested in anything that you produce.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm doing stuff not just for Planet X too. Like I freelance as well. So I've done a number of projects for other companies, and they've all been people that I like, friends, you know. I just did one for Exalted Funeral called the Vorpal Almanac, which is a book all about swords. I always find that like when magic weapons are presented, they're usually pretty boring the way, you know. But I found this really great artist from New Jersey. She's a comic book artist, Sally Canarino. She's an amazing artist. She has these brilliant full page illustrations of all these different swords. And I teamed up with her, and really driven off of her imagination, her art, I just riffed off of each one of these swords. We created a really, really cool book about swords. She did a really neat cover. Looks like an old farmer's almanac, but there's swords and, you know, armored figures. And it just came out really, really nice. Exalted Funeral's putting that one out, and it's a hardback. It's got a ribbon, you know, the whole 9 yards. Like it's really, really nice. So several different projects along that line are coming out. So busy year.
And quick question for you is, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but like it seems like once in a while I look at all the stuff coming out, and especially the OSR kind of area, and I go, has it all been done before? But then, you know, you come up with this concept with the swords and looking like an almanac, and I go, that's cool. I want to buy that thing. Oh. Like, do you sometimes do you ever hit like a creative wall where you go, well, what hasn't been done before? Because there's just so much cool stuff out there, just so much.
All the time. All of that. So my trick to beating the creative lull, or you know, what they call it, writer's block, or whatever you call it, is I always have like 4 or 5 things going at once. So if I'm working on, like right now, I'm working on a Halloween zine with a couple friends, and it's awesome. But every now and then, like I get kind of monstered out, you know, like where I'm just like, I can't think about this today. But what I'll do is I'll switch gears and I'll go over to this, you know, a module that I'm writing with somebody else, or I move over to like issue 5 of the Phylactery. I'll go over and do like a couple pages on that. So it keeps me fresh. And if none of it's working that day, I just stop. I get up, I go for a walk. I live right on the water, so I can walk down the beach. I can, you know, go swimming in the cold water and freshen myself up, you know, and what are you doing, old man? You know, I can, I can get a fresh perspective. Or maybe I just go see a movie, or I live close to DC. Maybe I go up to the museums for the day, and I just stop thinking about RPGs, and then I can come back to it fresh and a little bit refreshed. That's my secret. I don't know how other people deal with it, but that's what I do to beat the creative lull. And it doesn't come very often, but every now and then it creeps in, and you gotta punch it in the face.
Well, Levi, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah,
you know, best of luck on this Kickstarter, and just want to say, you know, love your products. Just look forward to seeing more in the future.
It's very kind of you to say, man. Thank you very much.